You are listening to the Global CTE podcast with your host, Sylvester Chisom.
Welcome, my friend, to another episode of the Global CTE podcast. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. This is the place where we want to wrap a blanket of goodwill around the career tech education community and share the best, the brightest, the innovators, the creators, the people who are really pushing CTE to the max to prepare our students for success in the global marketplace. Today is no different. We are in for a treat, let me tell you. I have my good friend, Dr. Nzingha Williams, here today. Now, let me tell you about Dr. Williams. She is the director of CTE at Central Piedmont Community College in Charlotte, North Carolina, where she provides leadership in the strategic planning of career and tech education pathway creation, maintenance, and innovation. Nzingha is a member of ACTE, and she's also a 2019 Post-Secondary Leadership Fellow for ECMC and ACTE. She's also a 2021 NCSU Research Fellow for ECMC and NCSU. She's the author of the award-winning dissertation entitled History Doesn't Decide for Us, a case study of Black parents and their perception of career and technical education, with an in-depth look at the philosophies of Booker T. Washington and W.E. Du Bois. I cannot wait to dig into that. She is the host of the CTE in Color podcast, which is a continuation of Dr. Williams' dissertation. Dr. Nzingha Williams, welcome to the Global CTE podcast.
Thank you for having me. I am so excited. Super excited.
Yes. Listen, I'm always searching for people who are doing innovative things in the U.S., across the world. And when someone sent me a link to your dissertation and to your podcast, and I was like, oh my goodness, I'm like, I have to talk to her. I have to know her. I want to share her insights, her thoughts with the community. So we're definitely going to get into that dissertation. But before we do that, like, how do you end up here? Like, what's your CTE journey? What's your origin story?
Yeah. Wow. It's interesting you ask that question because I think about it often. It really starts in high school. I took CTE classes in high school, didn't know that I was taking career and technical education class. So early childhood, criminal justice, took those two. I took them because I just wanted to earn some extra college credit so I could, shorten my time in college. Fast forward to 2012, I've graduated college. I have my first job and I'm trying to figure out what's next. Where do I belong? A grant that I was on at a job that I had right out of college. I was blessed to get a job right out of college from an internship that I did. That grant ended. And so I found myself unemployed for a little while. And an opportunity came up at the local community college in Raleigh, North Carolina, Wake Tech, for me to work as an office assistant to their BLET, Basic Law Enforcement Training Academy. So I did that. And I fell in love with working with students, working in the training academy, working with our different municipalities and law enforcement. And met a man.
Okay.
We ended up getting engaged and I moved to Charlotte and I continued working with BLET here in Charlotte, North Carolina. So that's how I ended up in Charlotte. I met my husband and he wooed me over and I said, well, let me figure out how I can get to Charlotte. And the Lord blessed me so that I could actually land the same position that I had at Wake Tech at Central Piedmont Community College, working with the Basic Law Enforcement Training Academy. So I did that for about maybe 2 years. And then my dean at the time said, hey, I have this position. Would you look at the job description and let me know if you're interested in it? And I said, well, sure, I'll look at it. I'm interested in an interview for it, got the position, and I became a career technical education coordinator. And so as a coordinator, that's when I really got immersed into the space of career and technical education. And I was taken back to my time in high school because I was like, wow, I was doing this all along. And at the time when I was in high school, didn't know it. Come to find out, career and technical education really helped me kind of decide what I wanted to do after I graduated high school. And I had no idea that it was that avenue that did that for me. So, ever since then, ever since 2016, started as a CTE coordinator and just progressed along the way. In 2019, they asked at my college who wanted to take over Perkins and help manage that and cultivate those relationships within the faculty and our programs of study. And I was like, I do. I'm the person, I like federal law. I like to read legislation. I mean, I get geeked out by it. But so again, another piece of CTE, that Perkins legislation, and being able to kind of take the legal side of career and technical education and make it work for students and benefit students on their behalf, and not just students, but faculty, right? Because they benefit from it too. So
let's
stop.
Let's stay there for a 1 second because, give me some, I need to hear some tips because I feel the passion around the Perkins, and I know a lot of CTE directors, that's sometimes the part that people are not the most excited about dealing with. So like, give me some best practices that you've learned or seen or experienced for using that Perkins to really benefit the students at the highest level. Any insights to share?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I can definitely see why people don't like it because it can be daunting. And that I feel like Perkins is one of those grants that is heavily evolved, it's always evolving. And when it got reauthorized in 2018, it required us to be more intentional about how we spend those dollars. So no longer were we able to just say, I'm going to buy equipment and that's it. That's all I'm going to do. We had to think through how we were going to impact students, which for me, like I said before, I got really excited because I could really see law in practice. So I think the things that keep me excited about putting law in practice is partnering with my faculty, because they are excited about what they're teaching. So when they come to me with an idea on how they want to use Perkins dollars, it's not for me to use the law against them to say, oh, you can't use it that way. It's like, okay, I hear your idea. Here is where Perkins can help with that. It may not be able to help with your full vision, but here is where Perkins can really help with this area. And then we can build upon it from there. Or maybe this year we can't do the full dream. We can allot 20,000 to it. And then next year, maybe build on top of that, so it's in the project management of it. And it's also in helping other people dream about their programs, because I find sometimes that faculty get bright ideas by just having a conversation. And so I always start out a planning meeting with Perkins, like, okay, tell me your biggest dream. Like, where do you see your program in 10 years? Tell me that. And then let's work backwards to figure out how we can get you there. So that's how I keep it from being stale. And then I don't try to regurgitate the federal policy to faculty. I just, again, okay, what do you want? What is the latest thing you want or equipment you want? Now tell me how that's going to help students. If they can connect it to how it's going to help students, then we can do it.
So I'm hearing you're pushing and connecting the dream of building something that's going to be in service of students or the school, and connecting it with students, but pushing that dream and challenging your educators, the people who are going to use those funds, to dream big about their vision and see where Perkins can. It may not be able to do, like, let's graduate this thing. Like,
let's
like we could start here. It may not be able to fund the entire dream, but at least a piece of the dream. I like that. That's insightful. That is really insightful. And then and I do notice that sometimes too, people sometimes struggle with, like, no, you have to make it plain and clear. How does this benefit the students? That has to be top priority. Top priority in it. I know we
and
had
how it benefits the stakeholders, right? Because our programs of study at the post-secondary level, we're getting them in jobs. So if this Perkins can provide a best practice or an industry certification or something, so that when an employer comes to our front door as educators and say, I need 10 students that have training in X, Y, and Z, that's how I present it to faculty too. Like, Perkins can help with that. We can make sure that the industry partners that you're servicing, because most of the time they're the ones having the conversation, not me, right? I talk to industry sometimes, but majority of the time it's our faculty, because they have the connections. They're the ones getting the phone call. Oftentimes they're the ones putting them in jobs. So here's how that can even help with your industry partner relationship, because we have a funding source that can help build on those relationships. So
on those relationships. I love it. Let me ask you this. I noticed in your work at Central Piedmont Community College, you all are big on the trade day events. Talk to me about the importance of that, or any best practices on creating those events, because I'm seeing a desire for more schools, more districts, more post-secondary trying to create these events. But how do you create one to make it successful? I'm curious, these trade days.
Man, so much goes into these trade days. And they are amazing events. I think one of the biggest things are your partnerships. So we don't do it alone as an institution. We have ACE Mentoring, which is architectural, construction, and engineering. They're an organization here in our community that honestly, they kind of drive that trades day, and we come in as a partner. We say, hey, we have the facilities, we also have the industry partners, you do too, but we don't try to like hoard the event, if that makes sense. Like it is our event, and the bigger we can spread the partnership, the better it is for the students. And so a lot of times we are partners with our K-12. They're bought in, right? They've committed to bringing the students to our campus on that particular day. And so we work with them closely to know the date, know the time, know what our capacity is. So some of these events, it's grown. I think the first one we had was like maybe 150 students came. The last one we've had, we've increased it to like 300 or 400 students, high school students on our campuses. And so the other piece too, from the education standpoint or the community college standpoint, is we want to make sure we help students connect what they're learning at K-12 in their CTE programs to our pathways. So it doesn't feel like a huge jump. And those trades days allow us to do that. And then also add the exploration piece. So we make it fun, we make it interactives. And then again, like our industry partners, they're excited about it too, because they're fully aware that the next generation doesn't really know what their industry is. So even in our conversation with them, it's like, if you're going to participate, let's make sure whatever you bring is interactive, it's engaging, it gets them excited, right? So the very, very, very fun events, they are a lot of work, but it's so rewarding in the end to see students' eyes open and come back and take a class with us. So yeah.
That's awesome. So you invite the high schools from the area too to your events? I love it. How do you, I'm curious about that. Just last question. How do you measure success for those trade events? Like what equals success to you on those, or to your org?
I would say numbers of students that actually show up on that day. We want to see the turnout on that day, because we put in so much work. So, our students showing up, and then how many of those students come back to us or engage with us in something else. So whether or not they decide to participate in dual enrollment, or if they even decide to do something at their high school that is considered a success. Do they come back to us after they graduate? So they've graduated high school. They heard about our construction management program. And so now they want to come back and take that class or that program of study. So that's how we look at success.
So you have is it Charlotte Mecklenburg? That's your like big public school?
Charlotte Mecklenburg schools.
Do you you all offer dual enrollment in like some of these construction classes, you're saying? Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah. So we have a partnership with the organization here called The Rock, and Charlotte Mecklenburg schools and us, where students are able to do those programs in the afternoons. And then we also have the traditional kind of dual enrollment where they come on our campuses. So the Rock that's all they do is construction trades, HVAC, electrical systems. They have plumbing, construction management. And then they can go to one of our Harper campus where a lot of our programs are at. Welding is there and those sort of things. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love seeing those integrations and collaboration from the community colleges, 4 years to the K-12, like really trying to get these kids to figure it out as early as they can, like let them find themselves in the work, like you said. Like, I'm not sure what I want to do, but maybe coming to this trade day, I see something. I'm like, okay, that's me. I could do that. I want to know more.
Yeah.
Sure.
And we just had another event 2 weekends ago. It was a mass casualty incident demonstration, and that was more for our healthcare and public safety programs. That was our first one ever. And it was a great opportunity for people to see how these individuals work together and really how the world of work in that space operates. So when we had 2 scenarios. One was one of our city buses collided with a car. And then the second scenario was a bomb went off and you had all these casualties. And we had students that came and they were actors or role players. We had our fire CMPD here. We had our medic students who are in our medic program, our health science students that are in all of our health science programs. They all participated and they were able to do hands-on what they learned in the classroom. They were able actually to do that there. And then we had people observe and they got to see how it works when a call is made and who responds first. Is it the ambulance or is it the firefighter? Is it the police department? And what is actually being called on the radio? Like it was the most coolest thing ever. And we had a job fair like in between the scenarios. So people, like we had our major hospitals coming to set up tables to talk about what they do. And I was able, our medic, which is our ambulance provider here, they brought a mannequin that was a pregnant woman. And so I was able to deliver a baby for the first time. So that was cool.
Oh, man. That was the last thing I thought you were going to say. I love it.
Yeah, so that was really cool.
And I delivered a baby. What'd you do? That's when you came home. How was work, babe? Oh, yeah, I delivered a baby.
Oh, I had so many pictures. I was like, oh, I am earning this doctor title. I can put MD on my no. I'm just joking.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay. All right, look, let's transition. I want to jump into this dissertation. Okay. History doesn't decide for us. A case study of Black parents and their perception of career and technical education with an in-depth look at the philosophies of Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. Wow. So much power in that. How did you select this subject matter? Like what problem or what? Talk to me about that.
So it was really when I was a part of the ACT post-secondary fellow. I had just started my doctoral program in 2018 and did the fellowship in 2019. And I'm always I'm gonna work smarter, not harder. So I'm in this doctoral program. So what can I do that is CTE focused so that everything that I do can align. Every article that I read aligns with what I'm doing at my actual job, and I can finish this dissertation. So we were in a workshop, and a shout out to Dominique Foots. She was one of the colleagues in the fellowship with me, and she put a question in the chat. She was like, so, how do we decipher or deal with the discord between Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois? And when she put that question in the chat, I was like, I think we were in an equity, diversity, inclusion workshop. I can't remember what the workshop was, but I was like, you know what? I know where I'm at. It's like sometimes pulling teeth for our Black students to take advantage of career and technical education. And with Perkins 5, there's a huge focus on special populations, and there's a lot of intersectionality with those special pops category as it relate to our Black American students. So I'm just like, I want to answer the question, why don't they participate? And I know that there is a discord between Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. How relevant is that today? And how much does that play on the psyche of Black parents when they're having conversations with their students? Because they're the key stakeholders. Like, as educators, as teachers, counselors, we have conversations all day, every day. But when that student goes home and they see their circumstances, they hear the conversations that their parents are having, or their guardians, whoever's taking care of them, those are the ones that's driving their decision making. So I want to know, what do Black parents think about this, and how much does this discord between the two of them play into that decision in those conversations? So that's how I got there. And it was, and you may have a question about this, but it was a hard process. It was challenging, especially during COVID and the pandemic. But I'm so glad I did it. I'm so glad I did it. Yeah.
What insights did you learn? Like, what's happening in the household, like with the parents? Like, did you, I want, before I get to the Booker T. Washington, that part, like, what did you learn from what's happening in these households?
Just, parents don't know what they don't know. A lot of them they definitely know about the Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois piece of it, but they have no clue what opportunities are out there for their students. And for many of them, they may not even have a degree. They may have thought college was the only way, so I'm not going to do it. Most of them were first generation students, if they do have a degree. And many of them had some of them were, HBCU all day, every day. If my child is not going to a HBCU, then they can't go to any other institution. So there was a lot of, thoughts around where their students should go, why they should go there, and how that really will impact their family economically. Like, that thought process, that 4-year does automatically equal economic success. And that had a lot to do with their advising.
Does the parent population, were they from a certain geographical area, or like the people that you did end up having these discussions with?
They were all from Virginia and North Carolina.
Virginia, North Carolina. Okay. So I from your dissertation, I read you had a Harvard study in there from your dissertation. 70% of poor children remain poor into adulthood. I'm curious your thoughts. How can CTE bridge that, like, be a bridge for economic mobility?
Oh man, where do I start? I think it is a true bridge to economic mobility. I mean, one, I think career technical education gets students excited about learning. So if I'm a student and I'm taking math and I can know how math is going to impact my future, then I'm more likely to stay engaged in my math class, right? Secondly, it exposes the students to so many options that are fiscally responsible when it comes to their living situations. So I use myself as an example. I grew up in a single parent household. My mom was great, was amazing. But we lived paycheck to paycheck. And the thought process about how we were going to pay for college never came up. I was an A student. I graduated top of my class. Like, I'm going to college the question of whether or not I'm going to college never came up. But the question of how we're going to pay for college also never came up. So I graduated from high school. I go out of state, which was a huge mistake. I go out of state and I get all this debt. Right. And then I'm told, don't stop, keep going. And I get my MBA. Now, there's nothing wrong with education. I thank God for the undergraduate degree. I got my MBA. I don't even know why I got my MBA. I was just told don't stop. So that just seemed like the next thing to do. Right. Yeah. And when I think back about it, I should have, if someone had given me more guidance, right, into how to go about that journey. My end goal was at that time law school, but there were other ways to get there. I could have stayed at the community college. You could go to law school with anything, but I thought I had to major in a certain major to go to law school, right? Even some of the conversations I have with my students who want to be doctors, if you cannot afford the 4-year education right now, it's okay. Become an EMT, get that hands-on experience. And especially if you need to make money, you could start working in the state of North Carolina, at least at the age of 18. And here in North Carolina, EMTs make between $42,000 to $45,000 a year. So now you have a career with a decent income and you're getting experience. So when you get ready to apply to med school, you have experience on your resume. It's not to say that you can't go to med school. It's just a different way of getting there. So I think CTE provides a different option, another option or a different path for students to take that oftentimes yields itself to less debt. So when you talk about the economic gap, studies are out here that we carry the most educational debts, us Black people that look like us, but we're still lagging in our household income. But we got all this debt, and it's getting to the point where the bachelor's degree is not really yielding the ROI, the return on investment that we needed to. But we got all these industry credentials that we can get, and a lot of them are through our local community colleges or even our high schools, right? If it's built into the curriculum at the high school, where a student can get that credential and go to work and then keep building on. And in some cases, some situations, their employer will pay for them to go back and get the bachelor's. And now you know exactly what you want to do. You're not spinning your wheels trying to figure it out in college. And I want to repeat myself, because I'm not saying college is not for college is in the picture. All I'm saying is, because I have a doctorate degree, so I'm pro.
So
I'm pro
you're pro
college.
For the right, it's like for the right, with purpose, right? I think it's just saying, let's be more purposeful and intentional about our educational choices post-secondary. However, like what you said, so many of us are working off of limited information of who we know in our immediate circle, network, neighbors, church, a cousin, an uncle who's doing something or who's done something, and not fully aware of, like what you just said, the different roadmaps to get to an end goal, to be a lawyer, to be a doctor, or the opportunities that exist post-secondary that are credential based,
right,
and that are not connected to a 4-year degree. Can you uplift some of those opportunities that that are available, like at the community college or maybe through partnership with like high school?
Yeah. So I can highlight some of the partnerships we have here in Charlotte. Okay. We have a program at our local community college where we have a partnership with Year Up. Man, this is an amazing partnership. And Year Up is a national organization, and they're here in Charlotte. But students come and they take 6 months of our business courses, and then they have an internship with Lowe's or Bank of America. Okay. And more oftentimes than not, I have not yet heard a point where a student was not hired by Lowe's or Bank of America with just those 6 courses, right? And in that program, they're learning how time management, dress attire, but they have something to work towards. They're learning something that's applicable to maybe the job that they want to go into. And we've had students in that program, start out making $50,000, $60,000 a year, $70,000, $80,000, because they're in banking and corporate America making that money. We even have some outliers out there that's making $80,000 and $90,000 a year, and they don't have an associate's degree or a bachelor's. They took the right courses that the employer needed. So that's one example. Another example is, I think back when I was a coordinator, we had a student who took our HVAC program. He got his degree as an HVAC student. And a lot of times in our programs of study, internships and externships and co-ops are built in. So students may, take a class, take classes for a week, and then they go work for the next week. Well, this student, 18 years old, graduated and started working for, I forget the company that's HVAC here in Charlotte. Anyway, graduated with his 2 years degree, and I believe he started making maybe $68,000 a year. He had an associate's degree. That associate's degree at the community college cost him maybe $5,000 for the time he was here.
Immediate return on
Immediate
investment,
return on
multiple
investment.
times over.
Yeah. So, I think about some of the credentials that's out there, like NIT, CompTIA. I mentioned EMT before, where you have a lot of programs out there where you can get EMT certified in a summer or in a semester. BLET is another one, or basic law enforcement training. I don't know if they have that everywhere. I know they have that here in North Carolina, but there's so many examples where, you do a 6-month program, 2-year program, but it doesn't take you a long time to get what you need and to go to work. Mm-hmm.
So here's the part where I get really curious about how, because like you said, the conversation that is most impactful is the one that's at home, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, how do we get this list of 6 months here could equal 52,000, like a year here, or like this certification could equal, 50,000 coming out. Like, how do we get that information in front of the students, parents, and get them excited about these opportunities that they may not be aware of personally?
That's a really good question. So, I'll tell you some of the ways that we've done it here and some ways that I would like to see. So I think around the country, really, your workforce boards and your post-secondary institutions and even your K-12, they have websites that you can go to like see that, right? In North Carolina, we have this website called nccareers.org where it lists out all of the credentials that you can earn. It tells you where you can go earn those credentials, how much money you can make. And I would just being in different circles, I would go as far as to say it's not just unique to North Carolina. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
like there are other
right.
There are other states that do the same thing. But what I would like to see, is the mentality of if we build it, they will come. Like that needs to go away. We really have to go into these communities and have intentional, intimate, trusting conversations to help them to help people reprogram their thinking and really show them these opportunities and talk to them. I think that a lot of times in education, we ask too often for parents and students to come to us, come to our open house, come to our trade event, come to our this, come to our that, versus going to the places that they trust, and really, answering their questions one-on-one. Some of the things that came out of my study, I talked about some people being first generation students. If my grandfather, and I heard a lot of stories like this when people were talking to me, if my grandfather, my grandmother didn't finish high school, let alone elementary school, or my parents don't even have a high school diploma, I don't know if I feel comfortable enough to walk into certain spaces. And that's the kind of stuff that we have to think about if we say we want to reach people of color, and in this case, Black people, right?
Yes.
There are invisible barriers that other people may not get or understand, but culturally, it could be very hard to cross a threshold when I feel intimidated. And for some people, they may say, well, you shouldn't feel intimidated. You should just do it. But if I'm not comfortable in that space, but I am comfortable in mine, can you get uncomfortable for me to get what I need? And I think that's where we need to get to. Not everybody is comfortable coming on a college campus. They don't feel like they measure up. They're scared they're going to say the wrong things, or they don't know what questions to ask. But if we go to them, I think they will get it a lot more because they're safe there.
What are some of those safe spaces? You said come to them in those safe spaces. I'm curious, when you say safe spaces? Like, what are you thinking?
So, well, if you haven't heard it in my language, I'm a church girl. I love
I
Jesus.
did. I did. I
Um,
set you up. That was an alley oop. That was an
thank
alley
you.
oop.
Did I duck it? So churches, I think, are one of those safe. Church is really, really big in the Black community.
Right.
And people may not always attend the church on a Sunday, but when they need something, a resource, they go
Yeah.
to the church house, right?
Yeah.
They see their pastors and their spiritual leaders as so many things. So more often than not, they're gonna feel comfortable in those spaces. I'll even add in there, local libraries. Like people
Mm-hmm.
are, and I'm not just saying you set up a board and say but no, you have a time, you have a space where you are interacting with those people and you're not relying on the library staff to do it, right? Because they don't
Mm-hmm.
know your
Mm-hmm.
organization. And so, but I would love to see like churches being utilized
What's
in a
that? Okay, walk. Let's
imagine.
just let's live. Let's just live there for a minute. Dream big.
Okay.
Dream big, like you said
Yeah.
earlier. What does this church CTE event look like, or this like this workforce development
Mhm.
church event? Have you seen one, or like what in your head? How do you see this?
And I have not seen one. I'm trying to think. I haven't seen one. But I think back to where I grew up in Lawrenceville, Virginia, and I remember, Monday through Friday, Monday through Sunday, the church doors were open. There was
Okay.
always somebody at the church. And whether that was for, we had a food bank or a daycare or whatever. But what would it look like if even at my church back at home, we had a space where there was a computer lab or there were workshops going on where families could come in and learn about different things. I remember growing up, they would do some workshops about like nutrition and,
Right.
how to identify abuse and all that kind of stuff. Okay, let's have a conversation about college and career. Parent,
Mm-hmm.
this is the question you should ask when you're meeting with your student the counselor for your student or the
Mm-hmm.
teacher for your student. These are things that you should look out for. Did you know that this program exists at your local school? So that sort of thing.
And we're partnering. You're seeing potentially church and community college or high school counselors or people who have anything to do with these certifications here
Yeah, if
as a
I'm
resource.
dreaming,
Yeah,
it's everybody because it
yeah,
takes a village. So it is the workforce board that all they do every day is talk to industry partners. They
yeah,
know the companies that's moving into the area. They know, what because they're having conversations with these companies, they know what skills are going to be needed. It's
yeah,
the community college that could even potentially have a class there some nights, like
yeah,
and teach, even educate the parent, get the
yeah,
parent upskilled and
yeah,
reskilled, right? It's the local school teachers, the local counselor who can, now the student and the parent see you outside of school hours, so now they feel more comfortable to engage with you, and they see you, they
mhm,
humanize you, so they're more comfortable asking questions. So if I'm dreaming, it's everybody, and
yeah,
it's even, the people that the faith leaders that run the church there
yeah.
to maybe provide the spiritual side of things, right? So that
Mhm.
everybody can kind of get the holistic support that they need. It's the
That's a
banks,
that's such a good that's
financial
such a
literacy.
good that's such a good idea. Yeah, that's such a
Yeah,
good idea, especially for those churches who are really going deep in their community activism.
mm-hmm.
So who knows? Maybe someone here is listening, is
Maybe
going to take this
let's
Dr.
do it, do
Williams
it, do it.
church and CTE playbook here. Now look, let's get back to Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois. Like, what is the connection to CTE between these two like titans? Like, talk to me. Like, what'd
Yeah.
you learn? Like, what's their connection to CTE there?
Oh wow. So Booker T. Washington, I believe, and I hope it came out of my dissertation, he is the founder of career and technical education. I mean, we know Dewey, we know Poser, we know those gentlemen. Thank God for their contribution. But we left out Booker T. Washington in the grand scheme of career and technical education, right? He was very political, very intentional, and also politically driven in his institutionalized, or I would say, trying to systematically get Black people from being formerly enslaved individuals to freedmen. It was CTE, it was industrial education that drove that. He established a Tuskegee Normal Institute, now we know as Tuskegee University. And not just that, but like what I learned that really blew my mind was just his involvement with all of our historically Black colleges and universities. His involvement with Tulsa, Oklahoma. He was the person who named Black Wall Street. I was like, wow, like, so like wealth and freedom and ownership when it comes to formerly enslaved Black people was really helped driven by Booker T. Washington. White people listened to him. Now, how he did it, a lot of Black people didn't agree with that. They felt like he was a sellout or he accommodated too much. He didn't speak up enough about injustices, but he really was behind the scenes, willing and dealing, trying to get white people to understand, like, I know you don't necessarily see us as equal, but we don't even have to work together. Just respect us for our skills and pay us for our skills. I'm not even asking for you to like us. I just want you to respect us and remember us when you're out here, during the revolutionary, when you're establishing what the new American way will look like. You remember the Black people that built this country. Remember their skills and hire them and pay them a living wage. And then you have W.E.B. Du Bois, who came several years after Booker T. Washington. But, when it comes down to it, they pretty much believe the same thing. We don't have to be equal, or we don't have to be working together, but you need to treat us as equal, right? And so a lot of people don't equate W.E.B. Du Bois with career and technical education, but he taught at Tuskegee University. He was heavily involved in, again, the development of HBCUs, and all of our historically Black colleges were founded on teaching and developing those agricultural skills of giving back to the communities that they're around. So, and then the contextualizing of the classroom were both of their ideologies, I would say. They both believed in what a student learns in the classroom needs to relate to what's happening outside in their community. And that's what CTE does, right? It makes living plain, makes life skills very, very plain. So they both were elitists. Their perspectives and how they grew up made their language about what they wanted to see for Black people very different, but their ultimate goal was the same. And so people know W.E.B. Du Bois by his comment about the town's 10th. Only 10% of Black people would be able to help the other 90% move up in generational wealth. And he labeled those 10% as doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs. But what people don't realize and what's not really talked about is before he left America and moved to Ghana, he changed that language altogether. He talked about the guiding 100th, which means it takes all of Black people, all of their skills, everything that they bring to move a people up economically. And so I think it all came full circle for
How do you, I think you're over here reading my show notes, my questions here, because I was going to ask you, how do you think about that shift in philosophy from the talented 10th versus the guided 100 as it relates to CTE? Like, how do you see that guided 100 connection today as it relates to, CTE and Black parents?
Yeah. So when I talk to Black parents, again, a lot of them really know, like, I call them the major careers: doctor, lawyer, engineer, and then you throw nurse in there.
Okay.
I think what the guiding 100 did was, let's take that and HVAC tech, or Black Mason back then, your boot shiner, your auto mechanic, your farmer, everybody, all the industries is what will help us move up as a people. And so in the 21st century, we need the doctor, the lawyer, the engineer, the nurse, but we also need the auto mechanic. We need the surgical tech. We need the CNA. We need the plumber. I need the person who lays my concrete. I don't know the technical term for that, but we need everybody to do their
Bricklayers.
parts, right?
Yeah, and when you think about it, like when's the last time you called a doctor to come and fix your air conditioning unit at your
Yeah.
house, right? And then here's the question: did you look at that bill? Did you see, like, so I think there's also part of this, right? The trades, the status associated with
Mm-hmm.
doctor, lawyer, maybe entrepreneur if you in whatever trade or field, but seeing the status level needs to increase. The narrative needs to shift around
Right.
these career options that create success and stability in
Right.
families and upward mobility
Mm-hmm.
as a person persists and sticks with that. You know,
Yeah. And I
I,
mean,
I really go
you
ahead,
think
go.
about generational wealth, right? Like, okay, let's look at our counterparts, our white counterparts. A lot of them, even when I talk to this white males in school, they're like, my father owns an HVAC or a welding or electrical wiring company, so I'm going to work in my family business. I talk to a lot of Black people who want to be entrepreneurs. Like, that is entrepreneurship. That
It
creates
is.
generational wealth. You start a construction company and you just pass that through your bloodline, and before
Yeah.
you know it, it's a 50-year-old company. And most people, using that example, they look at construction, they're like, okay, only people that work in construction, we just thinking about the people who actually build the things. You need an
Hmm.
accountant, you need a project
Right.
manager, you need someone who could read blueprints, you need all the different components that goes into running a business. So you need a lawyer who can negotiate contracts or to negotiate your RFPs. So by
Hmm.
having a construction business that's in the family, and it may have been started by one person who, at the time, all they were doing were building things and different, but it has evolved into this, grand, I don't know, just
Organization. Yeah. No,
organization.
you're 100% right, because you can look at a trade like plumber and say, "Oh, someone's just a plumber." That's so unfair. That's not
Right.
right. When that person is taking care of his family with a great career, great job, but that plumber also, that could turn into, yes, I'm a plumber and I have 50 vans that are out on the road, or we do all the commercial
Mm-hmm.
plumbing for, large corporations. There's so many different ways, but I think it goes back to what you said, that exposure,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm grateful for what you guys are doing with those trade days. And I think we need more things where it shows people, whether, like you said, we go to them or they come to us, to see and experience other things that they may not have been aware of,
Mm-hmm.
that are connected to their personal interest.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that's where we're gonna find that success. So I,
Yeah.
I do I do have a question for you about going deeper on Booker T. Washington. We
Mm-hmm.
touched Talented 10th and the Guided 100 on the other side, but I'm curious your thoughts: human capital theory and Booker T. Washington. How are they connected to skills and our future workforce?
Yeah. So human capital theory basically says the skills that you earn, or the more skills you have, earn you more money, equate to more money. It's a economist theory. Uh, so with Booker T. Washington, um, he equated the formerly enslaved skills that they had earned or learned or been forced into learning, right? If we're honest, by working on property and picking cotton and, building all these things, that should equal a certain amount of income. And so that's what he was preaching, when he was talking to philanthropic partners or, white men who were making these decisions. Like, okay, you um we're no longer your slaves, okay, but make us people who contribute to society by paying
Mm,
us a livable wage. And so my skill or our skill equates to this. So today, in today's job market, I think that's where the job market is now turning. when we look at what industry partners are looking for, they're not really looking at the bachelor's anymore. They're looking at, I'm not saying they've done away with it, but it's like the bachelor's and these credentials. If you have these credentials, you can earn more money. Like your bachelor's is worth more money. We have a lot of times at the community college, we have individuals who do have a bachelor's and they come back to us to get the credential that they need, right? So it's the skill is what is earning or is equating to a dollar value today in the 21st century. So it's the same way as it was back then. Unfortunately, back then, well, I guess we could say it for today too, Black people still aren't getting paid what they worth, right? Our dollars are less than our white counterparts. And that's something that there's an opportunity there to grow. But we do know through research and what the workforce market, the labor market is telling us, is that those credentials do earn you extra income.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I like how you frame that and really put it into a modern context with all the things that are happening in credentials and badging and that sort of thing. I do want to push on this the podcast CTE in color. I am a fan. I encourage anyone who is listening to check your Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast so you can hear Nzingha dropping more knowledge and gems. But tell me, like, what's any inspiration behind that? Like the CT and Color podcast.
I owe all the credit to my dissertation committee, because that was some of the feedback they gave me when I defended and we were reviewing was one of them was like, you should start a podcast because they really saw it, and I appreciate their insight. They saw it as, I just can't put out academic journals. I will do that, right? But this topic is really meant to be very practitioner based. Like I want Black people to take this information. If that means that I have to pull it out of that long dissertation and put it in a podcast so they can hear it. They can chew on it. They can push back on it. They can, disagree with me, like all the things, or they could be like, yes, yes, yes. Like we need to get the conversation going. And I want so badly for people to have the knowledge. The Bible says people perish for the lack of knowledge. And so I want my people, Black people, to stop perishing when it comes to the economics. And then we just continue to pile on debt after debt. And then we get frustrated. And it's not to take away from our oppression and the things that we have to deal with because of the color of our skin. But I want to provide hope. There's something we can try to do about it, right? Learn so you can get the right skill and get what you need. And I know that they may not pay you what you're worth, but at least you don't have all that debt, right? To fight again. You don't have the weight of debt to fight against all the other stuff that we got to deal with already because we're Black, right? So I want to give my people and other people benefit from it, which I'm totally fine with it. But
I think that's I appreciate your primary focus on sharing it with our people, but I also think you're helping to just add more color, as you say, CTE and color, to the narrative, the perspective, the voice, adding your voice to the CTE space. I think is important and powerful, and you're doing it. And I think you're gonna be surprised with, as you continue on that journey, because you're really on to something. You're really on to something. That's why I wanted to have you on the show.
Yeah. And I do want to help, our people who are not Black, right? Really understand that it's bigger than they just not doing it. There are historical things that have gotten in the way, and we as a people have to climb out of that. And you can help us with that, pay us what we're worth. Let's start there. But also understand the history that comes behind the Black struggle in America. And slavery really affected us in ways that we're still discovering. as much as I knew about Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, I have so much more to learn. And like, even go even further with other gentlemen who contributed to the space of Black education in America. Because it's just so much to unpack, and I love it. So
I'm curious, give me one thing before I'm gonna ask you this question, then I have one more question for you to close us out. Give me something interesting that you learned about Booker T or W.E.B. Du Bois that you were like, wow, I didn't know that, or something that was interesting insight.
I think for Booker T. Washington, it was why Black people back then turned their back on him. Not, and everybody didn't do it, but why people disagreed with him. And it was how he moved politically. If he was today in the 21st century, he would be a Republican. He would be a Republican through and through, right? Like, right. And we don't, as Black people, we don't like to think of it like that, but it is what it is. And so I think that's what surprised me. I'm like, dang, y'all, he was spitting knowledge, but because of his political party, y'all was like, nah, he ain't talking about nothing. So, I think that was, if anything, it was convicting for me too. It's like, we have to check some things, when we are interacting with people, and just be mindful of our own biases in certain situations. And then I would say for W.E.B. Du Bois, it was the guiding 100, because I was like, okay, I really was just, looking at W.E.B. Du Bois, like, okay, I know he fits into the space of CTE because him and Booker T. Washington was beefing. Like, so let me figure out why they was beefing. And then I come to find out they're exactly the same. He would have been a Republican too. But then you have this guiding 100th, and you're like, wow, like we really leave that out. Even in the Black community, we don't talk about the guiding 100th. We only hear the talented 10.
Why? I know it's so crazy. Like, I was aware of it, and then as I was reading through like your dissertation stuff and listening to your podcast episode, you brought it up. I was like, oh, I forgot about the guiding 100, and it's so much more inclusive than just the talented 10. Why do you think we don't hear much about the 100?
I don't know. I could only, I'll answer it this way. I would encourage Black people to know your history. I think sometimes we regurgitate what we hear, right? Yeah. And we just, we don't say, okay, well, there has to be more. And so I think if we continue to learn our history, then we discover these new things. And what I appreciate about W.E.B. Du Bois is that he allowed himself to evolve. And I think Booker T. Washington may have had the opportunity to evolve too, if he had lived longer. He only lived till he was 54. But, W.E.B. Du Bois lived a lot longer. He was like, I'm out. I'm going to Ghana. I've had enough. But
did he say, doing your research, like, did you gather any deeper insights onto why he shifted from talented 10 to the guided 100?
I'm trying to remember. I think it was once he realized that it wasn't working. Like, he realized that, and when he did that talented 10 study, he was really young. He hadn't even graduated from Harvard yet. So I think just with age and understanding and listening to people and growing and reading and writing, like, he wrote a lot, and he, what's the word? Espoused, is that the word? A lot. And just his thinking. And so I think by talking to him, exposing himself to different things, and really saying, okay, maybe how I thought about that back then was just not the right. And he was so far removed from his upbringing. So, like I said, I don't know if I said this before, but Booker T. Washington was enslaved, and W.E.B. Du Bois was not. So W.E.B. Du Bois was privileged in a way because he grew up in a very aristocratic family, somewhat wealthy type of thing. So he even grew up in a block where he wasn't the only, he grew up in a very diverse neighborhood, white people, all these things. And so it wasn't until he was maybe 10 where he faced, like, I'm sure before then, but where he can remember facing real racism, right? And then I think as you get older and life happens, right? You're no longer a young man, but life begins to happen. You start to think about some of the ways you used to think. I'm far removed from a mom and dad. I may not have my stake into the family wealth or whatever. And so that could cause someone to change their thinking.
I think it really says a lot. Like, as you we're having this conversation here about it with maturity, with, life and lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
You recognize, oh, I'm not just gonna stay loyal to this old way of thinking if it's no longer serving. And here's a new idea, a new concept that is more inclusive, and is probably the next iteration of that, the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
That's
And like I said, I think Booker T. Washington would have done the same thing, because he was one who quoted, like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
right.
And we've moved
Mhm.
away from that. We're like, what if they don't have boots? And you know, and that is more inclusive language. What if they don't have boots? So I think Booker T. Washington may have gotten to that point. I mean, they both were
Yeah.
they had, you work hard, you're gonna get where you need to go. Like, that was their thinking. And so in the 21st century, we don't necessarily carry that mentality anymore. We question, different things differently. So I think, if, like I said, if Booker T. Washington had lived, longer, he would have also evolved.
Yeah. And I also think too, on his side with him, it gets me, as I've listened to you and talk about this, we can't just write people off. Like, this man has such deep, deep impact on generations and generations and generations of Black people, and helping to move them toward upward mobility, and just American, like a true pillar of American history with
When I
great
read
impact.
how the money he raised for building our Southern educational system, and most of our HBCUs were founded in the South, I was just like, so I want to do more. I'm like, okay, how much did he touch all of the other HBCUs? Like, that's what I want to learn or research again. But I'm like, man, would we have? I don't know. Will we have all of our HBCUs if it wasn't for Booker T. Washington?
Yeah. I'm not familiar. Is there like a Booker T. Washington Foundation, or a
I don't
state,
know.
or something, like, like where there is, someone's
I don't know. That's a good
archived a
question.
lot of things, or yeah, that may be interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
last question. Curious how you're gonna answer this. Last question. This is something I ask all the guests on the show. What's your vision for the future of career tech education?
Ooh, that's a good question. Mm, I would say where it really is more blended learning, where it's not separate from general education for our post-secondary folks, and is not separate from our core classes for our K-12 people. Like, it really is seen as an equal footing with all those other types of learning and educational platforms, because I still think CTE is definitely still seen as less than. It's where the students go who, don't want to learn. It's a dumping ground for a lot of our some of our schools. So our K-12 schools. So I just that's where would like to see the future of education. Like, it's equal, it's compatible with our other forms of learning.
Yeah. Listen, we are definitely in alignment with what you just said right there, and I think which is part of the reason why I created this podcast, to try to shift the narrative, the conversation, um, to highlight the beautiful work, the honorable work
Mm-hmm.
that CTE offers, and that it touches everything. It literally is everything. It's like culinary, it's cybersecurity, it's plumbing, it's electrical, it's artificial intelligence, it's all of it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and us uplifting that as honorable, respectable work, where people are driven by their passion and things they care about.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for your time, for being on the show today. How can, if anyone wants to reach out to you, to connect with you, to have you deliver a keynote, a workshop, or something, how do we connect with Dr. Nzingha Williams?
Yeah, so you can follow me at CT in color _ the podcast on Instagram. And you can also email me at realeducatedllc@gmail.com.
Awesome. I encourage you all to take a look at the podcast CT in color. We'll make sure we put a link to it in the show notes as well. If you enjoyed this episode, don't be selfish. Share with a friend. This was something special and very unique, deep perspective on CTE that can help a lot of people for sure. So please share it. And until the next time, to the next episode, remember, you don't have to be great to get started, but you have to get started to be great. Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Global CTE podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to be the first to know about future episodes.